So at the minute, it is Islamophobia Awareness Month. I'm not sure if you're all aware of this, but
I mean, I'm doing my best, but I'm just one man.
I know I'm helping you out at least.
It's a
So-
whole month. It's not just a day.
Mhm. So,
For me, it's a whole year.
so in the spirit of Islamophobia Awareness Month, I thought it'd be good to look at Islam because, of course, it's definitely not a topical topic at the minute. There's certainly no conflict that's going on that everyone's talking about. That's not happening.
To be fair, though, Josh, I mean, you could pick any day,
That is true.
and that would have been true, right? So
That's the tragedy of the situation, isn't it? So if we move on to this BBC article here, this is for Scotland, by the way. Islamophobia awareness should be taught in every school. And
see, I just read this as a form of promotion. Go around the schools. Are you Islamophobic enough? Are you sure you haven't really worked on this? Sorry.
I remember actually when I was at school, they played us a video to do with domestic violence, trying to discourage people. And don't worry, this isn't going where you think it's going. And the gentleman was using lots of creative language to insult his wife, which just gave all of the kids in the class lots of new insults. And I think that this sort of thing is what's going to happen because if children are anything like what I was like at school, then whatever you're told to do, you will do the opposite as a matter of course. And that's probably what's going to happen here. And it's also worth pointing out as well that Humza Yousaf is, of course, the First Minister of Scotland, who is a Pakistani Muslim. So it's a strange thing for them to be so concerned about when the highest position in Scotland is occupied by a Muslim. One would presume that they're fine.
Hi folks, we've rolled out a new feature on the website, which is the ability to pay for an individual piece of content. So usually it's £5 a month every month to subscribe to all of the content on the website. But I appreciate there are going to be people who simply don't want to do that. They would be interested instead in purchasing a single piece of content for a lower amount, and they've got a particular niche that they're interested in watching. And so they don't want every single piece of content. They just want this one thing. So we've introduced this function where you can just simply purchase the one thing for £1.89, which I think is about $2.30 at the current exchange rates. And then that's just yours forever. So there's no sort of commitment there. There's no rolling subscription. It's just that one thing. So that's an option now that's on the website. It's completely live. It's completely available. And please go and enjoy it. And we'll see you all very soon. The Muslim population of Scotland is also very low.
It is indeed.
Most of them in Britain live in England.
Mm-hmm. And it's also very strange as well, because quite often things are framed in a minority sense. And actually, Europe somewhat shares a border with the Middle East. And I believe the population of Europe is 742 million versus 1.8 billion Muslims in the world, or a quarter of the world's population.
Yeah, and Stelios, in Greece, do they have Islamophobia Awareness Month?
They have all sorts of craziness. Yes, they have all sorts of craziness. I haven't heard the month, but yeah, we do have people saying, like Varoufakis, for instance, that we should decolonize Greece and stuff like that.
Would it not be interesting if Islamophobia is there, if it's a true phenomenon, which I suspect it probably is? Actually, what does it mean? It means a fear of Islam, does it not? A fear of Islam. So it might be interesting to open up the debate somewhere in the country about why people would have a fear of Islam. Why would they have this fear?
It's not as if there's a track record at all, is there?
No,
I'd be afraid.
Exactly. And it depends. Islamophobia links with homophobia, does it not?
Well, it's...
how deep do you dig without turning up your proverbial can of worms? Perhaps people are phobic about Islam for a reason.
Well, it feels a little bit like the emperor's the emperor's clothes, right? The emperor's new clothes. Everyone can see it already. It seems to be kind of out in the open already, but nobody is brave enough to just go. So
there's also some very clever linguistic subversion in the term itself, because of course a phobia is a psychological condition, and it's implying that
fear, right?
Yeah, it's implying irrationality.
Yeah, it's implying that there's no good reason to be
exactly.
Yeah, and people would probably describe me as Islamophobic, even though it's more of a rational objection to the tenets of Islam. There's not necessarily fear. I mean, I wouldn't be saying what I say on this podcast if I was afraid. So it's kind of a silly term in the first place. But I wanted to draw attention to this next article because this is particularly egregious. So this is all about Charlie Peters of GB News. He called up a mosque. I believe it's Lewisham Islamic Centre in London. Bo was telling me actually, as someone from Essex, relatively close to it, that it's got a bit of a dodgy reputation around there. I don't know London. It's like a foreign country to me. I'm, from the West Country.
I'm from England. London's a foreign country to me.
Yes. Yeah. It's like Mordor to me, to the Shires. So he called up because there was a video of one of the imams accusing the Israeli Defense Force of committing terror and calling for Muslim countries to intervene in the Israel-Hamas conflict. And he also, for some reason, denounced the singer Justin Bieber and Kylie Jenner as sick because, of course, these are the sacred cows, apparently, of British culture for some reason. I don't really understand the focus on them. I mean, I'm more than happy for people to call them out, but
I can explain terms. Because I really think this is sort of ties into T.S. Eliot's view on revealed religion. So it's very clear that Islam is the revealed religion of Muslims because it's what they do. They literally, organize, go to mosque every day, pray 5 times a day. You can see Islam in their lives. And so they're looking and going, right, well, we do all of these things. What do the Westerners do? And our revealed religion appears to be pop stars and indulgence and laziness. And so they're like, okay, yeah, well, we denounce your pop stars. It's like,
so do I, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to blow up your shopping malls. So, okay.
Well, that's a bit worse than denouncing pop stars.
Sure, but we're going to attack the things we think you hold as sacred cows without realizing we don't actually hold them as sacred cows. We lack anything sacred, really.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of apathy towards these sorts of things that they don't necessarily understand because, of course, in their own cultures, if they're apathetic towards something, it tends not to be a cultural institution in the same way.
They come from a culture that prioritizes honor, right? So to insult something is to degrade the honor of that thing. But I don't care if you degrade Kylie Jenner or whatever it was.
I encourage it. Yeah,
exactly. I do the same thing on myself. Yeah, I hate.
I wish I knew who she was.
Yeah, I don't really know.
Well, I wish I was in your position, Godfrey, to be honest.
But that's the point. They're looking at this from a very old world perspective, being like, right, like pop stars. How we're insulting them. What will you do? Nothing. And so we must seem alien and incomprehensible to them since we don't care about these things. But sorry.
No, you're very, very right. So. It's also worth mentioning as well that this mosque, which has been described as extreme by the government, which doesn't count for much.
Is that why they gave it so much money?
Yes.
Yes, they gave it over £500,000 of taxpayers' money between 2015 and 2020, because that's what we should be doing with taxpayers' money, is giving £500,000 to mosques. I'm very pleased that all of my taxes are going towards that sort of thing. But
just sorry, as a quick side, just imagine how schizophrenic they must think we are. We're like, we don't like Islam, but we are going to give you loads of money. And we're not going to take offense when you insult our culture and the things you perceive to be the sacred cows of our culture. We're not going to take offense. We're actually going to give you money. And then we're going to be angry at the people for not treating you with due respect. It's like, what must they think of us?
I think it's part of the reason why they talk about Britain and the West, more generally speaking, as being ripe for Islamic conquest culturally.
Yeah.
Not an actual military conflict per se, although some, I don't doubt, would like that. But more so that they're going to try and convert as many people because they see us as misguided, which, the latter part isn't necessarily untrue.
Have they converted anyone, though?
Andrew Tate, I suppose.
Okay. Yes.
Not that counts for much.
I have suspicions about the Archbishop of Canterbury.
I think you might be onto something there.
I've never heard him really stand up for Christianity, so he must be going for something, somewhere, somehow.
I think it has to do with lobbying to a significant extent, because I think that the demographics of Muslim populations in Europe are overwhelmingly voting for left-wing parties, whereas in their countries of origin, they may support more conservative policies.
This is kind of epitomized in Turkey, in Germany, easy mistake to make, where they'll vote Erdogan in Turkey and then a left-wing party.
But Greens in Germany.
Yeah, so it's more of a divide and conquer issue that leftist parties are playing, and they are exchanging money for political support. They're buying political support and they're saying, I'm going to fund whatever you want me to fund.
So coming back to the story itself, Charlie Peters contacted this mosque to ask them about these sorts of questions. that are raised from their rhetoric about basically calling for a jihad against Israel and getting taxpayers' money.
How dare you denounce Justin Bieber, sir? Sorry.
But these seem like legitimate journalistic questions, right? You're getting taxpayers' money to go against the official government line on the conflict, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that you reach out to them for question. But if we move on to this tweet here from Charlie himself, the Lewisham Mosque uploaded to their own Twitter account, which I'm quite surprised exists, because I would have thought that a mosque wouldn't have a Twitter account. I mean, maybe I'm a bit backwards.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect a church either, but here we are. And they pretty much screenshotted their reply to him, and they went through his GB News articles and tallied up how many of his articles. It said down here, it says, the articles you have churned out for GB News website, which we number at 40, it appears 17 of these related primarily to Muslims, i.e. 42.5%. You have a further 5 articles relating to issues of race and refugees. And they go on to say that, well, considering you are not an ethnic minority, well, you must be racist.
You're not allowed to talk about this subject.
And I don't think Lewisham Mosque is actually concerned about racial equality. I think they're...
Really?
I know that's a rather radical opinion. But
This came as a shock.
I think they're using our controversial politics against us for their own ends. And in this case, it's not to be scrutinized, which, you can understand. But they're using tactics that aren't necessarily communicating on good faith, are they? They're trying to deflect. And it goes on. And it also mentions that GB News has had clashes with Ofcom. Were you involved in this? Do you denounce GB News for their misinformation? Things like that. So they're pulling out every trick in the book to try and get out of answering the questions he sent them. And it's worth mentioning here, he says, I'm not intimidated by this slop, TikTok. And of course, he's saying, I'm waiting for you to answer the questions. The time's running out. But that's not how they chose to interpret it. Disingenuous or not.
Let me guess. They're going to accuse him of calling them terrorists, and that's a reference to a bomb?
They're saying that he's making a potential bomb threat to the mosque.
Right.
Which is a little bit on the nose from radical Islam, isn't it?
Hello, pot. This is kettle.
I'm a bit confused. You would think that they would have a bit more foresight than this to... I just don't understand why they would draw attention to that. It's also the first thing that comes to mind kind of reveals what's on your mind as well. So,
no, there's no reason we should think that the Lewisham Mosque is going to be involved in any bombings or anything, I'm sure. But the idea that can be tantamount to a bomb threat. I mean, come on.
So they reported him to the police for a hate crime. And I did contact him.
That's more worse than a hate crime. It's a threat of violence.
It is, yeah. So they kind of understood that it wasn't an actual
obviously
threat.
they did.
What policeman did you talk to in Lewisham? One wonders.
Well, suppose
on account of most of them are so stupid, it's almost unbelievable. Did you find an intelligent policeman in Lewisham?
I don't know. I can't say I've ever been for very good reason. Things like this.
If I was going to put my money on it, though, I was going to place a bet.
But as I understand it, I've not seen any news to say that the police actually turned up and followed this up.
Okay.
Perhaps they were too busy tearing down, those Israel posters, like some of them were doing. I don't think that was necessarily Lewisham, but nevertheless, it was the Met Police, right? So, yes, I did contact Charlie Peters for some sort of comment, but he hasn't unfortunately got back to me yet. So I wanted to find out whether the police did actually come round.
Yeah.
So maybe he is arrested right now. Who knows? But I haven't seen any news about it. So I think it's fair to say he probably hasn't. But the point being here, that they understand our political weaknesses in this country, what they can exploit to get away with doing what they want. Yeah. And there are lots of instances of this. And this is particularly egregious because of a new report that has come out recently, as GB News have reported on, in an article titled Police Ignoring Hate Speech Against White People, Shocking New Findings. So this is a report from the Institute of Economic Affairs. They, in GB News' words, found free speech was being stifled by a surge in numbers of hate crime investigations, which I wholeheartedly agree with that presentation. It says people who speak out on controversial topics, including transgender rights and Islam, were facing police probes after their opinions were flagged for being potentially harmful. The IEA's head of cultural affairs, Mark Glending, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it, who penned the report, claimed laws were only partially being applied. He also suggested police were refusing to seek prosecutions for similar cases directed at white victims. So these sorts of laws are also being selectively applied by the police, not only that they're being exploited and people know that you can exploit them, we are having our own institutions turned against us in our own country by people who I think have no place here. I don't think that's particularly controversial when it comes to that particular mosque. So, what do you all think of this? Godfrey?
Well, I think basically the problem we have, it all comes down to the walking away basically from our principles of English law, which have been developed over, one might argue, 1,000 years. And you have hate speech is a thought speech, isn't it? And in a free society, that doesn't stand up in law because somebody says, I've been shocked and insulted because, somebody said they hate me. That is not a matter for law. It's only a matter for law if you are inciting violence. Say, I hate Welshmen, so everybody needs to go out and find the nearest Welshman and duff him up. Well, that's illegal. But there's nothing illegal about saying, I hate Welshmen. Incidentally, I don't. But I mean, you should be able to say that in a free society. I hate Welshmen or Scotsmen or Lancastrians in particular, as a Yorkshireman. You can't really run a society with this kind of law. And of course, the first people who pick up on it are people who can abuse this ridiculous law. And then, of course, you have a politicized police force, certainly at the top, and police, the junior policemen in the main, who haven't had the benefit of traditional education and aren't frightfully bright, who are very easily manipulated by their assistant commissioner or their operational officer, so on and so forth, who are probably being fast-tracked from university and think accordingly. So you go shoot into being chief inspector, and then you're not even started shaving yet. But that's the kind of police force that we have. And I've watched it happen over the last 10 years. 15 years, the politicization of the police force, which is all quite deliberate. This is no accident. This is quite deliberate. So they can enforce, and when I say they, if you don't know who they are, you're very naive and stupid because they are now running the country. So it means that the World Economic Forum and their minions can now enforce lockdowns, jabs, or hate speech, or all this kind of thing that they do. And it's very interesting, if I may digress for just a moment, to see police behavior with Just Stop Oil blocking the roads and how they're treated and how people were treated when they were demonstrating against lockdown. You see no real desire to do anything about Just Stop Oil, and that comes from the top. That just doesn't come from the bottom. That comes from the top. And this is what we're seeing almost now on a daily basis. And I think that's, and of course, people have completely and totally lost faith in the police. And once you lose faith, a country like ours lose faith in the police, that's really a very serious matter indeed, because that means we're just now like any other nation. We don't see the policemen as our protectors. We see them as an intimidatory force.
May I add something here? Because I think that it is relevant. I think that to a degree this is understood, and the category of hate crime is largely invented precisely to give a facade of the police doing something. Whereas in fact, they are putting a lot of resources to things that aren't crime.
Not in the conventional sense anyway.
Yes.
I've actually spoke to quite a few police officers, both retired and current, and they say much the same thing as you do, that there's a lot of political pressure in the institutions to make them behave in certain ways, and anyone who resists will either be held down at a lower level and not rise up the ranks. And of course, there's also the compounding effect of insisting on having a degree to be a police officer, which of course is a form of selection bias for a certain type of person.
Of course, I mean, they are woke when they join the police, that they come out of it, and sad to say, the army is the same. They generally recruit junior officers from universities now, almost, right off the Richter scale. And you do not need a university degree to be a policeman or an army officer. In fact, I think it's a problem. It actually holds you back because by the time you finish your university degree, you think woke. You've lost any concept of risk analysis or objectivity. when you leave university. But I can't see the point of university education at all, least of all for a policeman or an army officer.
And
complete waste of time.
Yeah. And the idea of the purpose of the police is to guard public safety, not just to say that we are representing group X in the force.
Exactly. And the whole concept under Robert Peel was the prevention of crime. The whole concept was there should be bobbies on the beat to prevent crime. That was the whole concept. And it was a concept up to relatively recently, maybe 30, 40 years ago. You are a citizen with powers of arrest, and you are there to prevent crime. You're not there to be four of you in a car racing around the crimes already being committed. That's not the point of a police force. But as I say, we have politicians, policemen, soldiers, so on and so forth, who have not had the benefit of a traditional education, who couldn't give you the principles of English law, who couldn't have a really meaningful conversation about law. Lawyers, I know lawyers who don't understand law. They earn big fees for conveyancing and doing all sort of failing to abate a smoky chimney, but they don't know anything about the law.
Okay. I'm just a quick thing. I'm more concerned. I am obviously deeply concerned about those things, but I also think this manifests in a particular way, which gives off the aspect of a kind of self-governing Islamic community where it has its own Sharia courts. And I assume it has some sort of internal mechanism to enforce the decisions, some sort of community mechanism to enforce these decisions. And then when you've got the police, of course, being partial in their application of hate crimes and hate speech laws and things like that, it strikes me that the police don't feel they have a moral authority to govern the Muslim community and to police them in the same way that they police the English community. Whereas, of course, if a bunch of football lads turned up protesting that something was going on, they would. I mean, you saw the other day where it's like anything that comes close to being hate speech, and it's like it could be you would never talk to the Muslim community that way. And I think it's because the police don't really feel that they are the police of that community. I think they view them as sort of a separate thing that they have to hands off on.
And that comes from police college. If you look at the, police college, this is what they have been trained when they come out of police college. This is what they have been told. Yeah. And this is how and you can't do this, you can't do that, unless you phone up and get in touch with the local Muslim community representative who will then tell you what you can and can't do and where you can and can't go. No, it's not. I'm not blaming the police, particularly at junior levels. As you quite rightly say, that their career is over if they just say, "Oh, wait, just a minute, what about this or what about that?" No, they haven't got a prayer. Why anybody would join the police, I really don't. I don't know. I can't imagine why anybody would join the police.
No, but you're certainly right, Carl, as well, that they are treated with kid gloves, and I've heard firsthand that they basically apply a different set of laws to Islamic communities, which ironically, they're one of the few groups of people that are actually allowed communities in Britain anymore, because we certainly aren't. But the thing that kind of wound me up the most about this sort of area of political discourse is this next article from The Telegraph. It is worth mentioning as well. I have recently, if you go back, Jack, was very complimentary to The Telegraph, because I was basically arguing that they were stealing our talking points in the best possible way, of course. Yeah. I don't mean it in a plagiaristic way. I was pleased to see it, and I was saying, wow, all of these things that we've been talking about, The Telegraph has all of a sudden started talking about.
Finally.
And then I saw this article. So this is from a fellow called Hussein Hussein, or Hussein Abdul Hussein. Good, strong English name. Islamism
to be fair, he could be called Neville, couldn't he? Sorry.
That's just as amusing.
Or Peter for French.
Yeah.
So Islamism is a failed ideology. Muslims must embrace the West. So from the title, that sounds...
I mean, this sounds like something that came out 2009 or something, right?
It does, yes.
Good luck.
Mm-hmm. But I believe this is an Iraqi gentleman. I think he's big in the foreign policy world, particularly in the Middle East, one would assume. And I'm just going to read a little bit from this article, because I think that he's added some sugar to the pill, and the pill, of course, contains progressivism.
Yeah, of course.
And he's used language of the right and is appealing to the Telegraph's sort of audience, who might be conservative voters, maybe even reform, those sorts of people, to insert these notions in quite cleverly, I think, that I think are factually wrong. And of course, I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Okay. So it reads as follows. Growing up in Iraq and Lebanon, we looked at the West with awe. The West was ahead of the Arabs on many levels, including government, urban planning, social welfare, science, literature, technology, and military strength, which, of course, is true. In Lebanon, almost every child at school was taught 3 languages, English and French, in addition to our native Arabic. Parents talked to their children in these languages. We generally associated success and wealth with speaking Western languages. It carries on to say some other things about how the better you spoke these languages, the higher your status in these societies.
Sure.
And he says, during my years in the old homeland, the Arabs were in consensus over the need to emulate the West. But there was an obstacle. The West was Christian and we were Muslim. The Arabs therefore reasoned that they would copy everything from the West except social norms. We Muslims did not eat pork or drink alcohol. Intergender relations were strictly limited and monitored. And the collective tribal opinion always trumped the independent personal thinking. I think I misread that, but you get the gist.
Yeah.
So says, our westernized life copied consumerism but left out values such as liberty, freedom, and equality. The result was a society that was Western on the outside but backwards and tribal on the inside. Our societies produced states that were, in our image, sovereign on the outside but failing on the inside. So what's implicit here is that you can emulate these economic things because, of course, what he listed off there are largely products of the Industrial Revolution and our advanced economies relative to
Global
the Islamic world.
capitalism.
Exactly, yes. But I think what is missed here is that the reason that it happened in the West and not elsewhere, that was because of our social norms. It didn't just come out of a vacuum. It wasn't like 2001: A Space Odyssey where a monolith came down and we just, had these things divinely
There was no
put in
profit.
our head. Yes. Although one can somewhat understand why a Muslim might interpret it in that way.
Yeah.
But you can't divorce these two things. You can't divorce our society from our economy because the two are so intermeshed with one another that they are inseparable.
Sure.
And so he's trying to argue that you can have an advanced economy without the society that we have now, implicitly here. And I think that's a very subversive thing to say because, of course, then it demeans the value of our culture, of our society, because, of course, your metrics for greatness, of course, our culture can be viewed on its own terms, but also what it has led to. I mean, it's no mistake that the European powers were the colonial powers that we were able to...
I mean, in his defense, there is a lot about our society that should change.
Of course, yes. But the thing that I'm going to sort of skip forward to now is this. So he goes on to say, this is towards the end, this is why Arab and Muslim immigrants in the West now endorse the most radical and conservative of Islamist ideologies. The same Arab and Muslim immigrants who left their homeland to flee tyranny and failing governments are now cheering for the same tyrants that they left behind seeking better lives. And that latter part is true. I mean, we touched on that before. However, are they fleeing tyranny and collapsing governments, or are they coming to this country because we have a strong economy and they can make more money than their home country?
But also because we're really soft touchers.
We are, yes. We also give people free handouts, but that's sort of the whole economic package.
We're going to give your mosques £500,000 a year at the taxpayers' expense.
So this is using the language of the British right, broadly speaking, to insert notions that are categorically untrue. I think that to argue that they're just fleeing persecution, he's using the language of freedom to talk about people that don't conceive of it in that way, do they? They don't look at the world as totalitarian or not. You give Muslims a choice, and they'll probably advocate for dictatorship.
They'll vote for the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah,
they'll vote for Hamas.
But there's a flip side, is there not, to the coin? I mean, that might have been true 50 years ago. I don't know that that's true now. The West now is a secular society based on what my institute, the Mises Institute, would call welfare warfare. And credit. So consequently, I would argue now that our culture and our society is at an all-time nadir. We are not better than anybody else. I would have argued maybe years and years ago that it was. I believe there was a lot of good in the British Empire. It was, broadly speaking, as empires go, fairly pragmatic and fairly good and balanced as empires go. But now, based on non-interference. I mean, it was a Christian empire. British Empire was the biggest empire the world's ever seen. It was Christian, but we didn't interfere with other people's religion. In the Indian subcontinent, we kept our nose out. We were quite happy. We were quite happy for Hindus and Muslims to do their own thing. So it was fairly liberal in the English sense of the word. But I now think we are now so indebted, so addicted to warfare and welfare that I think we are ripe now for people bringing in another culture, however degraded that may be. But I mean, the Muslims actually believe that they have a system. I mean, our churches are empty. We have no moral compass. Even our democracy is a sham now. Our Houses of Parliament don't actually, our elected representatives in representative democracy don't actually stand up for anything that we want. I haven't been into a single pub ever where everybody thought the government was doing a good job. For years, decades and decades. Everybody thinks it's ghastly. And this is a problem that we have. So I would argue with this article, which I did read a number of times, it's like the curate's egg, good in parts, but I think it's perhaps, if it had been written 30 years ago, it might have been a lot more right than it actually is today.
I would certainly agree with you on that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that both in terms of dealing with law enforcement and our own government, as well as communicating ideas in our political discourse and, purportedly right-wing outlets like the Telegraph, they are using language which is appealing to our English sensibilities to more or less subvert our understanding of the way things are going in their own favor. And I very much don't approve of this. And I think that actually more attention should be brought to this sort of thing, because I think this is a very egregious article concealed in language that might otherwise be appealing. And as you said, it might have been appropriate in the past, but this understanding is very far from the mark.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the premium videos, this one on the politics of Barbie. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.